Hi everybody, Dan Illman along with the great Andy Beyer, creator of the Beyer Speed Figures, legendary horse player, taking a look at the graded stakes races at Oaklawn on Monday. Race number 8 is the Grade 3 Razorback. $500,000 is the purse. We are running a mile and a 16th. And Andy, I think this is a really interesting race, and I think the pace in here is going to be solid, if not outright fast.
It could go either way. I don't think there's a huge abundance of speed, but I guess with Jovi and Pioneer Spirit and Warrior Charge, it's at least going to be an honest pace.
And Timeform US has the pace listed as fast. They believe that Jovi stretching out from 6.5 might be able to make the front. Warrior's Charge has shown speed, as Andy mentions. Pioneer Spirit, those are the 3 pace horses in this race. It'll be interesting to see how fast they go in the early portion. We'll start our analysis down towards the rail with Exulting, who is returning to the scene of his biggest triumph. That was the Oaklawn Mile. First start off the Mike Maker claim here into 96 Beyer Speed Figure that day. I thought he had a really nice trip and ride by Richard Aramia, got a good pace to rally into, and since then it's been a lot of bridesmaid performances, albeit some on turf and some against some tougher horses.
Yeah, that race showed a lot of promise. It was certainly a brilliant claim by Michael Maker to take the horse and throw him into a $250,000 stake and win right away. But on neither dirt nor turf has he shown anything in the last 10 months that would make you think he's going to win here. I mean, I suppose if you're a believer in horses for courses, which I'm not, you might upgrade him, but I don't like his form.
Math Wizard was claimed for $25,000 by Safi Joseph, who's become one of the super trainers this winter at Gulfstream Park, and he pulled off a shocking upset in the Pennsylvania Derby 2 starts back, coming from last off a moderate pace to win that race. The Breeders' Cup Classic, he wasn't expected to contend. They took him to the back of the pack. They made one run hoping to get a piece, and he ran 5th. He has figs, though, the 99 in the Pennsylvania Derby, the 98 in the Ohio Derby, and why don't I like him more than I should?
Well, if Safi Joseph, is kind of a little-known trainer on the national scene. I mean, the people who follow Gulfstream, know that his horses frequently wake up in rather amazing fashion. I mean, his winning percentage dwarfs that of just about anybody, any trainer in this field. And that Pennsylvania Derby in the fall was a super race. So an odd thing about Safi Joseph, he almost never ships horses out of Gulfstream, with the exception of Math Wizard. So I don't know what that means, but knowing the way his horses wake up, let's say if you're playing a pick 5, I would certainly protect by having him on my ticket.
Especially considering the pace scenario. And if we do believe that the pace will be solid to fast, Math Wizard does like to rally from mid-pack or further behind, and he might get the right setup in here. And he certainly has the back figs to contend in this race. Bankit, I think, has been handled very well by Steve Asmussen throughout his career. He's a New York bred. He began his career as a very speedy 2-year-old. And as he's gotten older and as he's stretched out, he's become more of a one-run closing type. He ran a very good second behind Pioneer Spirit in the faster division of the 5th season last time out. A very promising first start for his 4-year-old campaign.
The 5th season was run in 2 divisions, and we've got 4 horses in here whose final times were within about 1/5 of a second of each other. So speed figures aren't going to really separate these horses. They're all pretty close together. But for some of the reasons you alluded to, I like Bankit. Asmussen is a tremendous trainer, and his great strength is is letting horses develop at their own pace. A lot of his horses take time to really get at their best. I mean, you remember, Gun Runner, good as he was, he really didn't become a major star until he turned 4. And I think that Bankit, in his 4-year-old debut last month at Oaklawn, ran a good, solid race. I mean, this could be another one of those Asmussen horses who's on the upgrade.
I tend to agree. I also liked his Oklahoma Derby. He was only beaten 3 lengths by a pretty good horse in Owendale. That was a race where he was really running at the end, galloped out strongly. His Albany at 1 1/8. If you had told me early in this horse's career that this son of Central Banker would be getting beat ahead in the 9-furlong Albany running at the end of the race, I would have been surprised, but Asmussen can do it all. Bankit very dangerous, especially if he gets some pace. I guess the key to this race is one of the strangers, and that's up next, Jovia. Jovia is best known for finishing 3rd in the Belmont Stakes, and even with last year's muddled 3-year-old picture, it was kind of a surprising result to see Jovia fighting down inside the 16th pole in the Test of the Champion. The rail was great, though, that week at Belmont, wasn't it, Andy? And that had to propel Jovia to that finish.
Yes, and certainly on Belmont Day it was. I mean, so I don't give him, like the kind of credit you would normally give a horse who was narrowly beaten in a Triple Crown race. And let's face it, Belmont fields in recent years have been pretty weak. So, that performance is not a decider for me.
That being said, though, he came back off of a long layoff, going 6.5 furlongs, and he won a race at Aqueduct. It was his first race as a 4-year-old, his first race against older horses. We see him in the blue silks being confronted from the outside, and he wins the race in solid professional fashion. Nothing brilliant about it, but the Beyer speed figure was a career best in his first race off of the bench. Greg Sacco, I think, is running this horse here because he has mind control ready for the Carter. I think this horse would have fit the Carter just as well as he fits the Razorback, but 2 turns is no issue for Jovia. What did you think of his comeback race? It was a 94 Beyer. It puts him in the mix if you believe there is continued improvement.
I'm just not enthusiastic about this horse. I know you like him, but what's he? We know that Belmont was kind of a phony race. I mean, what's he done? I mean, he won an allowance race. He won at Monmouth, loose on the lead on a sloppy track. He's up against horses with some really solid stakes credentials in here. I don't see his credentials.
I think basically you're banking on projection with a horse like this, looking at his figs and saying maybe if he could find himself, he's only run 7 times. If he can take a forward move against better horses, then perhaps Jovia will improve. I do like him a little bit based on the fact that he can rate a little bit off of the speeds and perhaps of the projection, but obviously he has not run the races of several of the others. And Pioneer Spirit, he's won 4 out of his last 5. He was claimed for $150,000. They claimed a soon-to-be 7-year-old for $150,000. Diodoro, another one of the super trainers, has been rewarded 2 stakes wins, including the faster division of the 5th season, a race we're watching right now. I think that Mojica made the move really at the right time to open up. He's just lasting over Bankit, who we see flying at him late.
Yeah, I think we've learned by this stage of the meeting that you take stands against Diodoro at your peril. I mean, he has just had an incredible performance at Oaklawn. Nevertheless, I agree with what you said about that race. I thought he had a fairly easy trip. I mean, he was dueling with a sprinter named Sevier who didn't last very long, and Pioneer Spirit just shook clear. And had a fairly easy trip, and and he was really getting tired late, and Bankit was making a big charge at him. I thought that all things considered, Bankit was the better horse that day.
Warrior's Charge is right next door to Pioneer Spirit. Warrior's Charge is trained by Brad Cox, and he has a good amount of early speed. This horse really found himself at Oaklawn Park last spring. 2 big victories which propelled him into the Preakness, and he lasted a lot longer in the Preakness than most people thought. That race took the starch out of him. He missed some time. He came right back, showed no rust. He beat a weak field, I thought, last time out. Although Gunnett, the very expensive Steve Asmussen trainee, he's running on the at the fairgrounds on Saturday, and maybe he'll improve. But boy, didn't he just get the easiest trip ever on the lead last time?
Yeah, well, those fractions were ridiculously slow. The speed ran 1, 2, 3 around the track. Again, with Brad Cox is somebody, as with Diodoro, somebody that I always hesitate to leave out, but I think there's enough speed in this field, to put pressure on Warrior's Charge, and I think he's a little up against it here.
Guess Sweet won the Lecomte as a 3-year-old, and he's still in good form at 6, winning the slower division of the 5th season. We'll watch that race right now. This race contested over a muddy track, and I think that was the key, because Guess Sweet popped his co-best Beyer speed figure of 95, and he's just always been a different animal on a wet track. He really seems to hulk up on wet going. On fast track, he's good. He's better on wet.
Well, he 4 races back, I mean, he won at Churchill on a fast track with a figure of 95, that equals his career best. So I wouldn't disregard him as being, because he's strictly a mudder. I thought in the 5th season, though, he was the beneficiary of a very good ride and a good trip. I mean, he showed speed, and De La Cruz eased him back. He got into a good stalking position. It was, you couldn't get a much better trip than he did. So I don't consider him as formidable as the other horses coming out of the 5th season.
His uncoupled stablemate, Rated R Superstar, I did not think have a good trip in last year's edition of the Razorback, where he was dismissed at 80-1. He was taken back to last down on the inside. He must have been on hold in behind horses and then in traffic in the stretch. He's a horse where you give him pace, he always seems to have a puncher's chance. Is he the most reliable horse in the world? No. But you look at some of his lines. The Stephen Foster, he didn't belong in that race. The Oaklawn Handicap was probably too tough. And last time out in the 5th season, it was his first start off of a 7-month layoff. This is a horse that maybe could pick up some pieces at a big price and make your single race exotics.
Yeah, in the 5th season, I mean, he made a big middle move that looked like he had a chance to win the race as the horses were going into the turn, and he ran out of gas. But that kind of move often signals that a horse is really in good form, or is coming into good form. And considering he was off a long layoff that day, this is a horse that could be 50-1, and who could get a piece of it.
Campaign, I thought, had a terrible trip in the Brooklyn in behind horses. Marconi took advantage of the gold rail and getting to the front on Belmont Stakes Day to wire that race, and Campaign was just in all sorts of trouble, and I just thought he was the best horse. He's just the kind of horse that I think wants a lot more distance, and I have no idea what happened to him at 3-5 last time out at Santa Anita. This is an interesting ship for John Sadler to run him here. He has won at 1 1/16 in the past, but I just feel like he might be better at longer distances at this point.
Yeah, he wants more distance, and this has the look of a tune-up for some other objective.
Snapper Sinclair is a millionaire, and he's done it all, whether it's turf or on dirt, and he just missed in the 5th season. We saw in that video Guest Sweet run him down in the shadow of the wire. He's a very honest horse with a versatile running style. I hate to knock a horse like Snapper Sinclair. There really aren't that many knocks. I just don't really love him in this race. I think that he's a consistent performer, but I just don't see an edge. At least the price should be right.
I thought, looking at, I mean, I looked hard at the trips of all the horses in the divisions of the fifth season, and I thought Snapper Sinclair ran quite well. He got into an early speed duel, and and after putting away the first rival he was dueling with, Night Ops and another horse kind of loomed up, and he got into another duel, and after the aforementioned guest suite, got a perfect trip. He nailed him at the wire, but I thought that it was a kind of a gutsy effort by Snapper Sinclair. His figures are about as good as anybody else's. He's a real factor in here. And
if you throw out the Clark and the Breeders' Cup Dirt. And if you throw out the Clark and the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, this horse just always seems to fire each and every time. Snapper Sinclair, perhaps interesting at a price. Mr. Lucas completes the field with Bravazo. He's banked $2 million in his career. He was second in the 2018 Preakness. He won the Risen Star. He was second in the Haskell. He was third in the Travers. He was third in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He was second in the Clark. That's a pretty nice resume for a horse that rarely wins. Not a great post position for this race. Do you think that maybe he's sort of racing himself back into form in his third start off of an extremely long layoff, or do you think the bloom's off the rose?
I think his glory days are behind him. I don't want him here.
And he'll have to work out a trip from a tough outside post position. Let's take a look at our picks for the Razorback. Andy, you like Bankit. He's just in good form right now. He should get the right pace set up. And again, I think he's going to offer a good amount of value in this race.
Well, let's hope. We'll see how they bet it. But as I say, I thought both Bankit and Snapper Sinclair were the horses who ran well in the in the fifth season, and I think they are the two with maybe a little Saffy Joseph to spice things up.
So, Andy, to key on the 3, 10, and 2 in the Razorback in multiple race wagers. I'm curious just to see what we get from Jovi, kind of an aggressive spot, second off the long layoff. Curious to see if he can sit off the pace. And again, with him, it's projection. With some of these other horses, we already know it's past performance, and the past performances are very good. Jovi has to improve, but I'm hoping he does. He's my top pick. Andy Keys, 3, 10, 2, 5. 4-5-3-2 for me. Grade 3 Razorback Handicap. 409 Central is the approximate post. Best of luck.